Oh.
Go as slow as you want. Do every Rashi and Tosfos. Do the rush. Fine.
Okay, so what did we do yesterday? We started yesterday discussing on Daf Samach Amud Beis, right? We started discussing how exactly you can measure your tchum when you hit a city, right? So let's just start by the two dots. We said, right? The Mishnah said, "Mashaniskar umafsid," whatever you gain on one side, you lose on the other side, which means that since you put the area of one amma to the tchum on one side, you have to detract it from the 2,000 on the other side of the city. It says the Gemara, "Mashaniskar v'tulo." It's only one amma that you lose. If you put the eruv within the ibur of the ilayas of klum, because it's within the city. But however, if you put it outside the tchum, which we explained means outside the tchum, so afilu amma achas mistaker oisa amma umafsid eskala kula. Right? Even if you only put it outside of the tchum of the city, one amma, you gain that one amma and you lose the entire city. Because now that you stuck your eruv outside of the tchum of the city, outside of the ibur of the city, right? So now, what you are missing, right, is not only that one am on the other side, but now you have to start counting 2,000 amas from your actual eruv, and whatever that goes into the city, it's now a problem, right? So what do you see here essentially? Is that what we're saying is that the city doesn't. We don't look at the city as one big dalat amas, right? That's not the way we understand it. But we understand that you go into it 2,000 amas, right? And so if the city is larger than 2,000 amas, so then you just lost your access to the entire city. So it says, right? So it sounds like from this brisa that you don't just lose one amma to the other direction. No, you actually lose almost right whatever the city, however long the city is, longer than 2,000 amas.
Isn't it it's a more fundamental one? We learned that the whole city was 4 amos. Now we learned that the city counts. Exactly.
So the Gemara is going to explain when we say what. Right. So the Gemara says like kasha kan shekol samidasay b'chatzi ha'ir. Right. When do we say that you have to count within the city because you put your eruv outside the city? So now you have to count 2,000 amos from your eruv, and you don't get the entire city. That's if kol samidasay b'chatzi ha'ir. If the 2,000 amos ended in the middle of the city, but kan shekol samidasay b'soif ha'ir. If the 2,000 amos spans the entire city, and so now the whole city is within 2,000 amos, then we look at the whole thing like 4 amos. Because it's fully included in your tchum, so we constrict it and we look at it as if it's just 4 amos. And now you can count 2,000 amos. You can continue counting the 2,000 amos from the other side. Uchdrab idi. I think we just lost you. Who's that, Ariel?
How are you?
Good morning.
Good. Good morning to you. How are you?
Good.
How are you feeling? Everyone's
Great.
good? How's it?
Great.
Is your wife?
Good. Everyone's negative. Yeah.
I'm good.
Were you upstate?
Yeah. Sorry.
Yeah.
No.
I'm upstate.
Very nice.
Yeah.
Oh, we
Yeah.
got a volunteer from upstate. Look at that.
Yeah. How are you? Good morning.
A good mode.
Okay. So.
Good kvittel.
Good to kvittel. Okay, so what are we saying here? What we're saying here is a very interesting thing. That if you put your eruv, if you're in your city, right? If you start off in your cities, everybody agrees, you have your whole city to just walk as far as you want within the city, and then you have 2,000 amos in each direction, right? But if you put your eruv outside the city, that's when things start getting complicated. If you put your eruv outside the city, so then it depends. If the 2,000 amos around the eruv and in the middle of the city, so you're stuck. You can't go further than 2,000 amos. However, if the 2,000 amos encompass the entire city, and the whole city is within those 2,000 amos, so we look at it as constricted into 4 amos, and you can start counting more past that city, right? Let's say your eruv was 50 amos away from that city, so now the city just counts as 54. It's 54 amos, and then you count the rest until 2,000 on the other side of the city, even if the city, right, is as long as the city is within 2,000, year 2,000. Okay. If you were counting, if you were measuring and within half the city, your measurement ended, you only have half the city. If it ended at the end of the city, so the nicest layer, right? So then you can start counting the rest after. Very interesting. So says Rabbi Idi, this is, it mamish makes no sense. There's no svara to this, to be mechalik in such a way. And it's, all it is nevius. Must be you're a prophet. Right? So Taisus discusses doesn't mean literally, is it a shvach, or does he, or is, right? Does it mean to praise him, saying that you're taka navi, right? And it's amazing how you came up with such a thing. Or he's trying to say no, like you have absolutely no makar, right? And only if you're a prophet would we believe you, right? So Taisus discusses, Taisus says, let's just read the first lines of Taisus over here. We have this expression a few times in Shas. Every time it says ein ela different nivus, havi l'shvach, it's a praise. Kloimar ein chachma kazu shemevin l'chalik. There is no great chachma like this, right? That he understands how to make this difference, right? Kol kach svara muetes, that it's such a daka small svara, right? Uvruach hakodesh omar, must be said it with ruach hakodesh. Right, so Taisus says that that's what the concept of Divrei Nevius means. Is he's saying, look, there's no real svara to this. If you came up with this, must be you're like a navi. Right, Mali kolsa b'chatzi. Why? Because there's no svara. Mali kolsa b'chatzi. What do I care if your 2,000 amos ended in half the city? And Mali kolsa b'seifer. What do I care if it's in the end of the city? Right, at the end of the day, you should only be allowed to go 2,000 amos. Right, and if you're telling me the city is all considered like daled amos, so then even if my tchum ends in the middle of the city, it should anyway be considered daled amos. I should be able to count after the city also, right? So Rabbi Idi says, I hear no svara for this. Now Amar Rava says it's not true. It's not different nevius. Right? He's not necessarily giving a svara, but what he's saying is that it's not. Don't call it different nevius. I'll show it to you in the Mishnayos. I'll prove to you this concept in the Mishnayos. Tarvayu Tanani, we have both of these concepts. In both cases, the case where it ends at the end of the city, the case that ends in the middle of the city. What's the Mishnah? That's the next Mishnah we're going to see at the end of the daf today. Anshe ir gedoyla mahalchen is called ir katana. Mishnah talks about a case where you have a big city next to a small city. Ir gedoyla next to an ir katana. So anshe ir gedoyla mahalchen is called ir katana. They're allowed to go the entire ir of the katana. The ain, continues the Gemara, ain anshe ir katana. The people of the small city are not able to go mahalchen is called ir gedoyla. They can't go the entire big city. Now, what's the case? What is the case over here? You have a big city next to a small city. The big city is allowed to go into the entire small city, but the small city is not allowed to go into the entire big city. Must be, Rava says, what's going on over here is that the big city, right, the tchum of the big city fully includes the small city. So therefore, the small city, the big city people are allowed to go the entire small city. However, mitzad the small city, right, mitzad the small city, their tchum of 2,000 amos ends in the middle of the big city, somewhere in the middle, and therefore they can't go the entire big city. Right? So you see over here this chilik, right? I might be able to pull up the pictures. Let me see over here if I can find it again. Daf Yomi. Just had it yesterday. Hold on. Oh, here we go. Daf Samech. Oh, they don't really have for Daf Samech Aleph. This is yesterday's Daf. Oh yeah, here. So they have one picture over here for us, right here. Right, so you have the Ir Gedoyla and you have the Ir Katana. This is the Ir Gedoyla, this is the Ir Katana. Now, for the Ir Gedola, right, that's the top ruler, right? The ruler shows that from the end of the edge of the Ir Gedoyla, you have 2,000 amos, and that fully encompasses, right, the distance to the small city. Right?
You can't see it, Ellie. You can't see it.
You can't
on your screen. And we see your Google play.
What do you see?
We see the Google search page.
Oh. Oh, you see this one. Let me see. Hold on a second. New share. This, you see now?
Yeah, now we see it. Yeah.
Okay, great. So, so you see the big city over here, right? And the small city over here. So we have the rule, from the edge of the big city, you count 2,000 amos, the top ruler, right? And that extends past the small city, right? So therefore, the entire big city is allowed to travel to the whole small city. However, and it's only considered like Dalet Amos. You're Kula Ke'arba Amos, right? That's the top, what they wrote here on top, right? So they can start counting, they can totally not count the length of the small city, and they can even go further. But the Mishnah says, either way, they're allowed to go into the entire small city. But the small city, right, they have to count 2,000 amos, and because they don't encompass the entire big city, so they can't go in the entire big city. They can only go 2,000 amos from their city, and they can only go halfway into the big city, right? And that's what the Mishnah is saying according to Rava, right? And he's saying this is a proof to what we said, that it depends if your tchum encompasses the entire city, so then you have the whole thing. If not, not. Right? So Rava says, don't say it's different nevios. It's not true. It's a beferish Mishnah. Now, it's not, we're going to see it's not so simple exactly what the girsa of that Mishnah is, and that's what the Gemara is going to discuss. Right? So he says, you see the daf now?
Yeah.
Yeah, okay, good. So ein anshe ir ktana mahalchim is kol ir gdol. Now my time, Allah mishum dahani kol samidasa in bechatzi. Here is it not because this, right, the small city is their tchum ends in half the big city. Vahani, but the big city calls me doesn't besayfir. Their measurement ends at the end of the small city, right? So therefore they can go the whole small city. So you see, it's a proof to this concept. The Gemara says, no, Rabbi Idi, anshe tani. He holds, it's not, you see the way we have over here, ve'ein anshe irktana, that the contrast is that the anshe irkdoila are allowed to go on the irktana. And the anshe irktana are not allowed, ein anshe irktana, malchim is called irkdoila. Says the Gemara, no, Rabbi Idi, he doesn't have that gersa. He learns also anshe irktana, malchim is called irkdoila. You know, what's this case? The case is mukim la b'noisen. It's not talking about a case when you're measuring. He holds the case of that Mishnah we're going to see later is a case of noisen, which means the idea is that if, again, you have this irktan and this irkdoila, and we're not measuring. What we're doing is someone from the irkdoila put his eruv into the irktana and before Shabbos, and someone in the irktan or someone in the irktana put his eruv in the irkdoila. And the chiddush of the Mishnah is that because I put my eruv in the city, so it's as if I'm living in that city, and now I have the whole city is mine, right? The whole city it's as if I live there, so I can go 2,000 amos from that city. Whether it's the irktana that's putting the irkdoila, the irkdoila is putting the irktana, your residence becomes that city, and I can count. Now that whole city becomes, you don't even have to count it anymore, right? It's like your own rishus, right? You don't have to count it at all. You count 2,000 amos from the outskirts of that city. The chiddush is that even though you're not really living there, even though you're not there for Shabbos, you put the eruv there before Shabbos, still that's considered your eruv. Okay. So, right, so Rabbi Idi, anshe tani, doesn't have ein anshe. He has anshe irktana, also can be mahal of the whole gdoila. Umukim lo ben noisen, and he establishes the Mishnah as a case where you put your tchum, you actually put the eruv in the city. Aval moedid lo, but now we're not talking about the measuring. We're not talking about the distance between the small city and the big city and how far you're allowed to go. That's not what we're talking about. It's not, all right? Aval moedid lo itnan. But Maidid, that's not what the Mishnah means. The Gemara says, is it not true? I mean, we'll find you the end of the Mishnah over there, I'll find you another proof that says that it's fine, that I could show you this concept. Maidid sha'amru, and the one who, the Maidid, right, the one who's measuring, that we talked about, Noisin loy alpaim amma, we give him 2,000 amma, shafilu saif midasai kalabi ma'ara, right? Even if the end of his 2,000 amos end in the middle of a cave, right? So still the Mishnah says, right, that you have to stop there, right? If you see the Mishnah at the end, it's the bottom of the page over here, right? Even if it's in the middle of a cave, you still not let it go into the middle of the cave. Meaning, even though, let's say my 2,000 amas end in the middle of a cave, I have to stop right there and not more. So what do you see? You see that if you end in the middle of the city, so too, right? If you end in the middle of the cave, right? You stop there in the middle. So the Gemara says, "Saifa iritz tzrichale." Right? He says, "No, I wanted to know. You're right. I know the concept that if you end in the middle of something, you have to stop right there. The chiddush that we were looking for is that if the tchum ended in the end of the city, right, then the whole city is like 4 amas. That magical concept that because my tchum ends at the end of the city, so the whole city doesn't count, that is what we were looking for in the Mishnah, and that we have no proof in the Mishnah. The proof to the other halacha that we do have, that if it stops in the middle, you have to stop in the middle, that we do have. Okay, so if iritz tzrichale, deloy tanan. That there is no Mishnah about, right? So that is where Rabbi is calling different nevios. Now, Omer Rab Nachman, man ditani anche, he just repeats what we said. Man ditani anche lo mishtabish. Someone who has their gears of anche, he's lo mishtabish, he's not wrong. Man ditani ein anche, lo mishtabish. Even if you have the gears of ein tani lo mishtabish, man ditani anche lo mishtabish. The one who says anche lo mishtabish, the mukim lo b'nais, and like we said, when you actually put the Eruvin, man ditani ein anche lo mishtabish. What does that mean, right? The mukim lo b'moided, he explains b'moided. Right? That's also not a mistake because you explained it to mean when you're measuring, and you would add in the following words. There's a few words missing. The whole anshe, the ir gdoila is allowed to go the entire ir ktan. Ve'ein anshe ir ktan malachim is called ir gdoila. Why? Because their eruv their tchum doesn't encompass the entire big city. But medvar mamurim b'moided. That's only if you're actually measuring. But by nice anything, but you actually put your eruv, right? Then the reason why Rabbi Nachman has to add these words is because the Mishnah explains the case, like we're going to see. So therefore, he's saying the Mishnah is really talking about two things. First, maidid, then noisen. Right? So he actually put in their ktana, or haya be'ir ktana ve'iniach es be'ir gdoila. So then malachas kula v'chutz l'alpay mama. Then your tchum becomes the city you put your Eruvin, right? That's where your residence becomes, and you measure your tchum from there. Okay. Amar Rabbi Yosef, Amar Rami bar Abba. Interesting halacha. Amar Rav Huna, name Rav Huna. Ir sheyesheves al sfas hanachal. If you have a city that is on the edge of a nachal. Nachal is like a valley type of thing. Now, it's steep and people might fall in, right? So, if there is a fence of 4 amas that stops the people from falling into the ravine, right, or the nachal, the valley, whatever it is, whatever you would call it, right, this cliff area that people might fall in. If there's a fence, so then we can start counting the tchum from the edge of the city, from the edge of the valley. Ve'im lav, but if not, if there's no fence, ein moedin lo ela mi pesach beisai. Very interesting. You have a city. Usually we assume that if you have a city, the outskirts of the city will be the beginning of your measuring of the tchum. But over here, what we're saying is that because this city is on the edge of a cliff, and it's very dangerous, right? So therefore, people should really be scared. They would really be scared and like running around and using the city normally because they might just fall off. They're kids, right? So therefore, it's not a regular city. We don't look at it as a city. It's not royally yishuv. It's not really considered proper to live in, and therefore, it's each man to his own. There's no city that's miyachid. There's no city, there's no halacha that it's considered a city and you can count on the outskirts of the entire city. No, it's each house to his own. So Amalei Abaye says, Daka arba amas amartlan, you say it has to be a daka 4 amas, of a daka that's 4 amas high. Why does it have to be 4 amas high? Why all other times we talk about a little offense, we only needed 4 tvachim high? Amalei says, over there when we use the daka just to separate different rishuyas and to show the separation of rishuyas, so over there there's no fear of using that area, right? So the daka only functions as a symbol. But over here, the reason why you need this fence is because people will be scared of using the city, using the area, and therefore you need a fence to protect people from falling off the cliff, right? So we see that's the pshat over here and why you need this fence, and that's why it has to be Dal Amos. Amar Rav Yosef, how do I tell you, Tanya? I'll show you a raya to this concept. Hiti Rebbe sheyu b'nei Gader yarden l'chamsan, ve'en b'nei chamsan oiden l'Gader. So Gader and Chamsan were two cities that were on an incline of a mountain, and Rebbe allowed the city of Gader, which was higher, to go down to Chamsan, but not b'nei Chamsan to go up to Gader. Right. So now we're going to try to figure out why. Right. There were two cities next to each other. Why did he allow the upper city to go down to Chamason and not Chamason to go to the upper city to Gader? My time, the Gemara says, "La mishum dehani avudaka, vani leavudaka." Was it not a pshat because the upper city they made a daka, right? Since they made a daka, they had a tchum. Since they made a fence and there wasn't an issue of anybody falling, right? So therefore, their city had a din city, and now they had 2,000 amos from the edge of the city. They could reach Chamason, but Chamason did not make Chamason itself didn't make a fence, and therefore they couldn't reach Gader because there were because each individual house had to count from their doorway and didn't necessarily reach the town of Gader, right? So you see, he's basically sticking in his pshat into the story of Rebbe, and he's saying, look, what otherwise could be the pshat? Why did Rebbe allow one town to go to the other town, and the other town not to go to the other town? Must be this is the pshat. So Kiyasu of Dimi says no. Omar tatrugi mitatrigi lehum b'nei Gader b'nei Chamasan. No, what happened is that Bnei Gader were violent people, and they would attack Bnei Chamasan. So Rebbe said that because there have been fights between the city, when Bnei Chamasan used to go visit Bnei Gader, they used to break out in fights, and Bnei Gader would beat them up, and it would be a problem. So he says, therefore, we should not let them go. So my hitir, hiskin, the halacha, it doesn't mean he was mater. It has nothing to do with hilchos Eruvin. It has to do with making sure there's peace, making sure no one gets beaten up. My hitir, hiskin. He was misakin that only the people from Gader are allowed to go to Chamsan and not the opposite. Because the people of Chamsan, when they used to go to Gader, they used to get beaten up. So the Gemara says, "Umayishna Shabbos." So why dafka on Shabbos, right? What does that have to do with Shabbos? All the time you should say they're not allowed to go. No, the Gemara says, the shchicha b'shichrus. On Shabbos, after the Kiddush, people get drunk, right? So therefore, they used to beat them up. There was more violence, right? So that's a problem. He was misakin that they're not allowed to go there. So the Gemara says, well, ki azli lahasam nami mitatragiluhu. Well, how does this make sense? The Gemara says, you're telling me, right, that the people of Gader used to beat up the people of Chamasan, right? And therefore, the people of Chamasan are not allowed to visit to God. They're not allowed to visit Gader because they'll get beaten up. So then how are you allowing Gader to go to Chamasan? Right? Rebbe was mater the upper city to go to the lower city. He was mater Gader to go to Chamasan. What do you mean? Aren't they going to beat them up? The Gemara says, no. Kalba b'loi masei, a dog not in his location, not in his place, shev shnin loy novach. He doesn't bark. For 7 years, he won't bark. Meaning, the people of God, they're only confident enough and only violent enough if they're in their own place where they're used to. But to go to someone else's place and then beat them up, that they won't do. So the Gemara says, Hashta nami mitatrgi b'nei Chamasan livnei Gader. Right? So now, b'nei Chamasan maybe will fight back in Gader. Now that the people of Gader aren't in their house. They came to Bnei Chamasan, now they won't be violent, so now maybe Bnei Chamasan will take revenge, right? And look, they're out of their comfort zone, so let's beat them up. The Gemara says, Kula hayla kaifalu. No, don't think that Bnei Gader were totally submissive to Bnei Chamasan just because they were in their area. No, they were still strong, and Bnei Chamasan was still afraid of them, right? It's just that they wouldn't go and start a fight if they're in someone else's place. But avad, if someone would start up with them, they would beat them up, right? So therefore, Rebbe understood that we can allow the Bnei Gader to go visit Bnei Chamasan, but not vice versa. Rav Safra Omar, he says, there's a whole different case. Rav Safra Omar, Ira, so Yukikesh Havoy. The reason why these two cities were, the reason why Rebbe said you're allowed to go to one, not the other, is because it was Ira, so Yukikesh. Like if you see, Taisus has a shot over here. Look like this. Gader was done like a keshas. It was done like a rainbow, right? It was like a bow, and Chamasan was over here, this diamond, right? So the people of God there were able to count from the edge of the rainbow, right? Right. We said that the halacha is that if it's near Asui Kakesha, so if from one side of the boat to the other side of the boat it's more than 4,000 amos, we don't count the middle, right? The middle is not counted as part of the city, and each, right, wherever you're leaving the city, you have to count 4,000 amos. So the people who leave, right, the people who leave Gadar, they could leave from the edge of the bow, and they could get to Chamsan, and vice versa. But the people of Chamsan, if they go this way, they won't necessarily be able to reach Gadar, right? So therefore, this is the parish of Taisus. Rashi has a different shot, which Taisus asks kashas on. Let's just read in the Taisus. The Gadar ir asui kekashes havai. Gadar was an ir of asui kekashes. V'loi haya ben Roshei arba alofim. There weren't 4,000 amas. Oh no, there weren't 4,000 amas, which means that you're allowed to count this part. Lefikach boin lechamasan. They can get to Chamasan. Aval bnei Chamasan einan yicholen alis legadol emtza keshes. They couldn't get to the middle of the keshes. And what he's saying is that the people of Gadar could count from the yeser, from the middle part. But the people of Chamsan, they can't count from that. They have to count. They have to try to get to the actual keshes. So there are places where the people of Chamasan couldn't get to Gadar because for them they couldn't count the inside part of the bow. But the people of Gadar can count the inside part of the bow. Okay. So that's another pshat. Rav Dimi bar Chinina Amar Anshe Ir Gedailav Anshe Ktana Havai. Right? It was the big city, small city thing, right? Just like we always explained, right? That just like we had the case we had is that if you have a big city, the whole big city counts from its tchum, and the Irktana is encompassed, so it can go in the whole small city. The small city counts from its 2,000 amas, and it goes only to the middle of the city, and so therefore they couldn't go to the whole thing. Fine. So Rav Kana Masni Hachi, right? Rav Kana just repeats in a different way. Rav Yomi Masni Hachi. Rav Kana repeated. This is Rav Kana. Rav Yomi, he says it the following: Rav Safra, Rav Dimi bar Chinina. He quotes both Rav Safra and Rav Dimi bar Chinina. He says Chad Amar Ir Suki Keshes Avoy, Chad Amar Anshi Irktana Vanshi Irgdel Avoy. Okay, so there's a machlokes as to exactly what the pshat is, but right. So Rav Kana didn't have Rav Kana had the names. Rav Yomi, he didn't peg the names. He just said Rav Safra and Rav Dimi bar Chinina. One said one pshat, one said the other pshat. Okay, now let's read the actual Mishnah which we talked about. Masnisin. Anshe Ir G'dayla Mahalchin is called Ir Ktana. They can go the whole small city. Anshe Ir Ktana Mahalchin is called Ir G'dayla. Our girsa is with that, not Ein Anshe Ir Ktana, but that yes, Anshe Ir Ktana can go the whole city, right? So the way we explain this is to mean because we're talking about you actually putting your Eruv in the other city. Ketzad Mishahaya but Ir G'dayla. If you were in a big city, V'nasan it's Ir Ktana, or Bir Ktana V'nasan it's Ir G'dayla. You actually put we actually put the Eruv in the big city, so Mahalchas Kula V'chutz L'Alpayim Amas. So then that becomes your residence, and you're allowed to go 2,000 Amas from that area. Rabbi Akiva Omer, Ein Loi Ela Miwakam Eruv Alpayim Amas. No, Rabbi Akiva argues. And this is where it gets interesting. Rabbi Akiva says, no, it's not true. That you can't just stick your Eruv in a different city and decide that's your residence, and now you have 2,000 Amas from that city. No, you have 2,000 Amas from that Eruv. If it's not in your city, so you need you only use 2,000 amas from the actual Eruv, even though it's within a city. Amar Lahan Rabbi Akiva. Akiva says, are you not masking to me that if you put your Eruv in a cave, you only have 2,000 amas from your Eruv, even though it's in a big cave. We don't say the whole cave is like one, and now you count 2,000 amas from the outside the cave. No. Rabbi Akiva says, just like over there, you count from the actual Eruv. So too, if you put it in a big city, also you have to count from the actual Eruv. Amrulai, so they told him, Emasai, when is that true? That's only when there are no residents in the cave. Aval yish b'diurin, if there are residents in the cave and it becomes a residence, then then they say no. Then it's the same thing like a city, and you would be able to go the entire cave. So because it's not residential, because the cave is not residential, that's why we don't count the whole cave as one big area. We just count it as wherever you put your area, you have to count 2,000 amas. But if it would be used and you would be residential, so then the whole thing becomes like one big residence, and therefore it counts, and you can go the whole thing and only count 2,000 amas after the cave. right? Nimtza, the Chachamim continue, Kal Toicha Me'al Gaba, right? That it's more lenient underneath than on top. Let's say you have a me'ora, let's say you have a cave with people living underneath, right? So let's say your Eruv goes underneath, let's say you walk underneath. Once you hit the cave, now people are living there, you can go the entire length of the cave because people are living there, right? But if you put your Eruv on top of the cave, right, and there are no people living on top of the cave, so then you have to count 2,000 amas from wherever your Eruv is, right? So it's an interesting thing that Chachamim are pointing out that even though you're dealing with the same cave, if you put your Eruv in the cave, right? So because it's a residence, so you can start counting your 2,000 amas at the edge. But if you put it on top of the cave, there's no one living on top of the cave, right? So therefore, you have to count from the actual Eruv. Now, v'lamoydid sha'amru, and this the Gemara quoted before, lamoydid sha'amru, the person who measures, right, who's coming into the cave, they only give him 2,000 amas. Shafilu soif midasa kol b'mara. Even if the end of your Eruv is in the middle of the cave, right? The end of your 2,000 amas is in the middle of the cave. The end of your tchum is in the middle of the cave, right? So then you have to stop wherever it ends, and you can't go the entire cave. Okay. Says the Gemara. We'll finish the parak. Amar Rabbi Yehuda, Amar Shmuel. Shabbos Be'ir Chareva. Shavas Be'ir Chareva. Let's say you made an Eruv in a city that is not Shabbos doesn't mean you put an Eruv. Shabbos means you actually were there. Before Shabbos, you were there, Be'ir Chareva, in a town that was destroyed. Right? The town was destroyed. So there's the remnants of a town, but there are no people living there. So the Rabbanan, according to the Rabbanan, Mehalaches Kula v'chutz al Alpaim Ama. Right? Because you were Shabbos there, you're allowed, the whole town is like considered one thing, just one residence, and you can count 2,000 amas from the edge of the town. However, hiniach is a ruvay be'ir chareva, but if you weren't there, you just put your Eruv there, so that's a lower level, because you weren't actually there, you just put an Eruv there, so therefore, ein loy mimakam eruvay el alpaim ama. Right? The Chachamim are maskim, you only have 2,000 amas from your makam Eruv, not like a regular city. A regular city, if you put your Eruv there, right, so you have 2,000 amas from the edge of the city, but over here, since the city that is empty, it's destroyed, right? So therefore, you have alpaim amma from your actual Eruv. Rabbi Eliezer says, he argues, he says, no, echad shavas ve'echad hiniach, whether you actually were there or you put it there, still mahalach eskula v'chutz alpaim amma, right? So because it's a city, he holds there's no difference between a city that's destroyed or a regular city. In fact, the Gemara, Meisivei, Amar Rabbi Akiva, Iatem moedim li, are you not maskim b'noisen and seruva b'ma'ara, right? Rabbi Akiva says, he brought them the case of the cave. The cave was that you have to start from wherever the Eruv is and not the whole cave, right? She'ein le'elam rokem ruva el alpaim amma. Amrulai, they told him back, Ein masai b'zman she'ein b'diyurim, that's because there are no residents, right? But if there are residents, like the city, so then you're allowed, right? Ha be'ein b'diyurim. But if there are no diyurim, the Chachamim are masking to Rabbi Akiva that by the cave, since there are no residents, you have to start from where the Eruv is. So why is this city, this destroyed city, considered there are no diurim? So therefore you have to count from the actual Eruv. My ain but diurim, the Gemara says ain ru'uya l'dira. It means it's not roy l'dira, right? So Rabbi Eliezer changes the whole thing. Chachamim seem to say you need actual residence. Rabbi Eliezer says no, you don't need actual residence. You need just roy l'dira. And this city, since even though the city was destroyed, it was abandoned, right? But since it's still roy l'dira, there's still a semblance. I guess there's still houses there and stuff, right? So therefore, you can actually, it is roy l'dira. So therefore, Chachamim would be maskim and say that even so, you're allowed to count from the edge of the city and not from the actual Eruv. Tashima, let's try to bring a raya. Shavas be'ir afilu higdoila ke'antuchya. If you stayed in the city before Shabbos, even if it's as big as Antuchya, which was probably a city in Greece, right? So, or in a me'ara, in a cave, afilu hi k'ma'aras Tzidkiyahu melech Yehuda, even if it's like a big cave that Tzidkiyahu melech Yehuda used to hide from the Babylonians and he escaped from there, right? So still mahalach is kula v'chutz al alpaima. You can go the whole thing and then out of the cave 2,000 amas. Ktani ir dumi demar. The Gemara says, what can we learn from these two examples? one is a city and one's a cave. Why are these put together? It's to learn that they're similar to each other. Ma me'ara chareva, af ir chareva. Just like we're talking about, just like a cave is not really used, it's considered like ma'ara tzidkiyo, I guess, was considered chareva, was destroyed. Af ir chareva. So to the city of Antuchya, we mean a city that's as big as Antuchya, but it's destroyed, right? And it says specifically shavas in aval in yachloi. Specifically, if you actually were there before Shabbos, but if you just put your eruv, they're not. So mani, and who is this? Elaim Rabbi Akiva. If it's Rabbi Akiva, so then my ir yachareva fil yesheva nami, right? According to Rabbi Akiva, we don't even need to say that it's destroyed city, even if it's settled, right? Still, according to him, if you weren't shayvis there, if you were just maniach there, you can't go 2,000 amas. Elulav, the Gemara says Rabbanan, right? Elulav must be it's the Rabbanan who hold that if it's settled. Right? If it's settled, then you can taka go 2,000 amos from the outskirts. Right? And only because it's chareva, right? Then it becomes a problem. Because it's chareva, you can't count from the outskirts. You have to count from the actual eruv. And what the chiddush of the Brisa is saying is that if you were shayves, not just meniach, if you actually were there before Shabbos, not they put an eruv, right? So then you're allowed to count from the outskirts of the city, right? And you see not like Rabbi Elazar, who held that even by near Chareva, if you're maniach, you can count from the outskirts. For time of the Shavas, only if you were Shavas. Aval hiniach loy. The Gemara says no. Loy tema ir dumi demara. Don't say it's an ir dumi demara. Say the opposite. Right? To say that the ir is Chareva. Ela ema me'ara dumi de ir. Ma ir yesheva, af me'ara yeshiva. Just like the city was settled, so too we're talking about a me'ara that's settled. And there's Rabbi Akiva, right? And so we're talking about a settled city and a settled me'ara. And what's the chiddush? The chiddush is according to Rabbi Akiva. The Omar Elam imakom Eruvin alpayim amma. Right? Rabbi Akiva said that even if you put it in a residential city, you still can only count from your eruv 2,000 amos. You can't count the whole city as yours, right? However, b'shavas moidi, right? But if you were actually there before Shabbos, even Rabbi Akiva's maskim that since you were actually there at the outset of Shabbos, so then you can count it as your real residence, and you can count 2,000 amas even from the outskirts of the city, not only from your eruv. In fact, the Gemara that Ma'aras Kiyo Katani doesn't it say it's like Ma'aras Kiyo? Ma'aras Kiyo was considered chareva. It's no one lives there. So the Gemara says Katani Kima'aras Kiyo v'loy Kima'aras Kiyo. It's like it, but it's not like it. Kima'aras Kiyo Gdaila. We mean that it's very big. Like Kima'aras Kiyo the ilu hasam chareva, but right over there it was destroyed. It was destructed. V'hacha yesheva. Over here it's really settled. Right, so we really mean to say we're using the Ma'ara of Tzidkiyo as an illustration for how big it is, but not really for the fact that it's Chareva. We mean even if it's settled. Mar Yehuda Ashkechinu Lebnei Mavarchasa de Kamoisve Eruvai Bebe Knishta de Be Aguvar. So Mar Yehuda found he noticed that the Bnei Mavarchasa, right? They had a city called Mavarchasa. They put their eruv in the shul of Bei Aguvar. Bei Aguvar was a little bit on the outskirts of their city, and they put the eruv over there, right? So Amar Lahu Gavu Bei Tfei. You should put the eruv a little bit further into the shul, Kiechi de Lishteri Lechu Tfei, so that you'll be able to go even further. Right. So what's the case? The case is that Rashi says the shul was fully within 2,000 amas of the city. Right. So imagine you have a shul on the outskirts of a city, but it's fully within 2,000 amas. Right. So essentially, we have a similar situation in the Mishnah. Right? They took their eruv and they don't put their eruv in their own town or 2,000 amas in the middle of nowhere. They put it in the shul, right? Since they put their eruv in the shul, so according to the Rabbanan, right, you would say that the whole shul becomes your residence and you can go 2,000 amas in each direction. But according to Rabbi Akiva, right, no, you have to count 2,000 amas from the actual eruv, wherever it is in the shul, because you don't really live there, right? So therefore, they're saying, he tells them, you should move your eruv further into the shul, whatever, so that you'll have 2,000 amas from the actual eruv. Get a little more space, right? If you get a little more space, right, so then you'll be able to go even further. So he says, push the eruv in, gavu beitzfei. Keicha delishtu lechu tfeisa, you'll be allowed to have more. Amalei Rav says, palgo be'eruvin. Are you arguing on the chachamim? Palgo means you're making machlokes in Eruvin. Leis the chash la Rabbi Akiva. No one cares for Rabbi Akiva. No one holds like Rabbi Akiva. We hold like the chachamim, who hold that since once you put your Eruv in the residence or in the city, we don't care about where in the city it is, right? You don't count from the exact location within the city. You don't count from the exact location within the shul either. Once you put the Eruv in the shul, the whole shul is considered like Dalad Amas, and you can count 2,000 Amas from there. So there's no point in changing it within the shul where I put the Eruv, right? That's Rabbi Akiva's shita. We don't hold like Rabbi Akiva. Okay, Hadron Allah Ketzad Ma'arvin.
Yeah.
Okay, shkoyach, everybody.
Thank you. Shkoyach. Good Yom Tov. Enjoy the Yom Tov.
Ba'atzlacha.
Good Yom Tov. What's the story after Yom Tov? On Monday, you're still in Bidud?
No, I'm out of bidud. My wife tested negative. I'm negative. My daughter's not. Everyone's negative, and it's been 14 days. Ganze Sachen. We're good. Yeah.
Okay, so see you Monday.
Yeah, B'ez Hashem Monday.
And
I'm not going to be. I won't be back yet, but Mitzvah, we'll see you when I get back soon enough.
Okay, gewaldig.
During the week, Mitzvah. Okay.
Shmuel,
Have a
right.
wonderful Yom Tov.
Good
I'll
Yom
ask
Tov.
Shmuel what he wants to do.
Right. Yeah, we'll see. We'll see what he's doing. What he's doing. I don't know.
All right, Gracie Yeshikoy, this is not easy stuff. You did good.
Okay. Yeah, thank you so much.
What's the next parak about?
It's Eruv v'chatzeres.
Good.
Eruv v'chatzeres, and how if someone doesn't make an Eruv, or if you have a guy, if you have a guy in your chatzer, you have to rent from him. Ganze Sachen. It's a different sugya.
Very good.
Yeah.
Right, call to good
Okay,
Yom Tov.
shkoyach, have a happy Yom Tov, healthy Yom Tov.
However it'll be,
Right.
whatever it'll be. Thank you, you too. Best regards.
Shkoyach, kol tov.
Bye-bye.